At 37,000 feet above the ground, both pilots collapsed. 300 passengers sat in their seats, completely unaware that their lives now depended on a 13-year-old girl in seat 12A. A girl who had never flown a real airplane. A girl who everyone thought was just playing video games. Nobody knew that in the next 2 hours, this young student would do something that aviation experts would call impossible. Before you read this incredible story, please comment below which country you're from and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing real-life stories. This is her story. Emma Rodriguez pressed her face against the airplane window, her eyes wide with excitement. At 13 years old, she still felt butterflies in her stomach every time a plane took off. But Emma wasn't like most kids her age. While other students were playing regular video games, Emma was flying. For the past 3 years, Emma had been completely obsessed with airplanes. Her bedroom wasn't decorated with posters of pop stars. Instead, she had cockpit diagrams, airplane photos, and flight procedure charts covering every wall. Her parents had bought her a professional flight simulator for her computer, thinking it would be a fun hobby. They had no idea their daughter would use it for 6 to 8 hours every single day. Emma had logged over 800 hours in her flight simulator. That's more time than many real student pilots spend in actual training. She had memorized every button, every switch, every procedure for the Boeing 737 aircraft. She knew how to start the engines, how to program the computer, how to handle emergencies that most people never even think about. Her friends at school thought she was strange. "Why do you spend so much time on that boring flight game?" they would ask. Emma would just smile. To her, it wasn't boring at all. It was magic. The idea that humans could build machines that fly through the sky fascinated her beyond words. Her teachers encouraged her dream but always reminded her, "Emma, simulators are not the same as real flying. You'll need real training someday." And Emma knew they were right. She understood that despite all her practice, despite everything she had learned, she was just a 13-year-old kid with a computer program. She wasn't a real pilot. Today, Emma was flying from Los Angeles to Chicago on Flight 394. It was a Boeing 737, her favorite airplane to study. The moment she had seen it at the gate, her heart had jumped with recognition. This was the exact plane she flew in her simulator almost every day. Her parents had sent her to visit her grandmother in Chicago. Emma was traveling alone for the first time, wearing her favorite hoodie with an airplane design on it. She carried a small backpack filled with aviation magazines and her tablet loaded with flight training videos. The flight started perfectly normal. Emma sat in her window seat, sipping apple juice that the flight attendant had given her. The businessman next to her was typing on his laptop, completely ignoring the excited teenager beside him. Emma had tried to make conversation earlier, asking him if he liked flying, but he had just grunted and turned away. Behind Emma, a family with 2 young children were trying to keep their kids entertained with coloring books. Across the aisle, an elderly woman was reading a book. Everyone was lost in their own world, comfortable and relaxed. The captain had announced earlier that the flight would arrive on time. The weather was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. Emma was watching a cloud formation outside her window when she noticed something strange. The flight attendants, who had been casually serving drinks and snacks, suddenly clustered together near the front of the plane. Their body language had completely changed. They were whispering urgently to each other, and Emma could see worry on their faces. One flight attendant kept looking at the cockpit door with fear in her eyes. Another one pulled out what looked like an emergency manual, flipping through pages with shaking hands. Emma's aviation instincts kicked in. She had studied enough about flying to know when something was wrong. She pulled out her earbuds and paid close attention. Then came the announcement that changed everything. The head flight attendant's voice came over the speaker system. Her voice was shaking, trying to sound calm but failing. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical emergency with our flight crew. If there is any licensed pilot on this aircraft, please identify yourself immediately. This is urgent." The cabin erupted in confused whispers that quickly turned into worried voices. A medical emergency with the flight crew? People started looking at each other with growing fear. Emma's heart started pounding hard. She knew exactly what this meant. The pilots were unconscious. Emma watched as the flight attendants rushed through the aisles, stopping to talk to passengers, asking questions. Every person they spoke to shook their head. 3 minutes passed. Then 5 minutes. No one came forward. No off-duty pilot was on the plane. No one with flight experience was available. The fear in the cabin was growing stronger. Passengers started crying. Some people pulled out their phones to send what they thought might be their last messages to family. The businessman next to Emma had finally stopped typing. His face had turned pale. The flight attendant's voice came back on the speaker, and this time she wasn't hiding her panic. Please, we need anyone with any flight training. Anyone with any knowledge of flying planes. If you have any aviation experience at all, we urgently need your help. Please come forward now. Emma's hands were gripping her armrests so tight her knuckles turned white. She looked down at her hands. These were the hands of a 13-year-old. Just a kid. She wasn't a real pilot. She had never touched real airplane controls. She had never been responsible for anything more important than her homework. But she had 800 hours in a simulator. She had studied the Boeing 737 manual cover to cover. She had practiced emergency procedures until she could do them in her sleep. She knew this airplane. Around her, people were crying harder. The mother behind her was trying to comfort her scared children while her own voice shook with terror. The elderly woman across the aisle was praying quietly. Emma took a deep breath and unbuckled her seatbelt. "Excuse me," Emma said quietly to a passing flight attendant who looked terrified. "I have flight training." The flight attendant turned to look at her. For a moment, Emma saw hope in her eyes. Then the woman really looked at Emma, saw how young she was, saw the childish airplane hoodie, saw the small frame of a 13-year-old girl, and the hope disappeared. "How old are you, sweetheart?" the flight attendant asked gently. "I'm 13, Emma admitted. But I've been training on flight simulators for 3 years. I have over 800 hours on the Boeing 737. I know this airplane. I know the systems. I know emergency procedures." The head flight attendant, whose name tag said Jennifer, appeared beside them. When she saw Emma standing there looking so young and small, her face fell with disappointment. "Honey," Jennifer said, trying to stay calm, "simulators aren't the same as real flying." "I know they're not," Emma said, looking directly into Jennifer's frightened eyes. "But right now, I'm the only person on this plane who knows how to fly. And I can do this." Jennifer looked toward the cockpit door, then back at Emma, then at the cabin full of terrified passengers. Emma saw the exact moment when Jennifer realized they had no other choice. "Come with me," Jennifer said. Quickly. As Emma followed Jennifer to the front of the plane, she felt every eye in the cabin watching her. She heard the whispers. "That's just a kid. Is that little girl really going to fly the plane? Oh my God, we're all going to die. She looks like she should be in middle school." Emma forced herself not to look back. She couldn't think about the 300 lives depending on her. If she did, she would freeze completely. Jennifer used her emergency code to unlock the cockpit door. When it swung open, Emma's worst fears were confirmed. Both pilots were slumped unconscious in their seats. The captain's head rested against the side window at an awkward angle. The first officer had collapsed forward onto the control panel. Soft beeping sounds filled the cockpit, warning alarms that needed attention. "What happened to them?" Emma asked, her voice steady even though her heart was racing. "About 30 minutes ago they both complained about terrible headaches and dizziness," Jennifer explained, her voice breaking. "Then they just collapsed. We think it might be carbon monoxide poisoning from the air system." Emma's mind immediately went to her emergency training. "We need fresh air circulation right away. Open all the air vents in the cabin to full. And I need oxygen." Jennifer nodded and rushed to give instructions. Emma stood in the cockpit doorway taking in the scene. This was real. This was actually happening. 300 people were depending on her, and she had never flown a real airplane. But she knew this cockpit. She had studied it for 3 years. Every switch, every button, every display, she had memorized all of it. Emma took several deep breaths and sat carefully in the captain's seat. It felt different from her simulator chair at home. More real. Heavier. The weight of actual responsibility pressing down on her small shoulders. Jennifer returned with an oxygen bottle and mask. Emma put it on immediately, breathing clean oxygen to protect herself from whatever had hurt the pilots. Then, with hands that trembled only slightly, Emma reached for the radio headset and put it on. She pressed the button to talk. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "This is Flight 394, Boeing 737. Both pilots are unconscious. I am a passenger with simulator training attempting to fly the aircraft. I need help." For several long seconds, Emma heard only static. Then a man's voice responded, professional but shocked. "Flight 394, this is Los Angeles Center. Please confirm, both pilots cannot fly the aircraft." "Confirmed," Emma replied, using the precise language she had learned from studying aviation communications. "Both pilots are unconscious. I believe it's carbon monoxide poisoning. I am a passenger with extensive simulator experience on the 737. I need immediate guidance. There was a longer pause. Emma could imagine the shock her words were causing. A 13-year-old girl trying to fly a commercial jet with 300 people on board. It had never happened before. It was supposed to be impossible. Flight 394, what is your name and age? My name is Emma Rodriguez. I'm 13 years old. But I have over 800 hours on high-quality 737 simulators. I know the aircraft systems and emergency procedures. Another pause. Then, okay Emma. I'm Controller Martinez. Listen very carefully. You are not alone. We are going to help you through every single step. We're getting every expert we can find. First, I need you to tell me, is the autopilot on? Is the plane flying stable? Emma scanned the flight control panel just like she had practiced thousands of times. Autopilot is engaged. Altitude holding at 37,000 feet. Heading 090 degrees. Airspeed 485 knots. All systems show normal. The aircraft is stable. Excellent, Emma. That's perfect. Don't touch anything yet. The autopilot is keeping you safe. Now, what's your fuel situation? Emma found the fuel gauges, showing approximately 16,000 pounds of fuel remaining. Good. You have plenty of fuel. Now Emma, here's what's happening. We're contacting Boeing's emergency team, senior 737 captains, everyone who can help. You're going to have the best aviation experts in the world guiding you. But I need you to tell me honestly, can you do this? Emma looked at the unconscious pilots beside her. She looked out the windscreen at the endless sky. She looked down at her 13-year-old hands resting near the controls. She thought about all those nights flying in her simulator. All those procedures she had practiced. All that knowledge she had learned because she loved aviation with her whole heart. She thought about the 300 people behind her who were trusting someone to save them. Yes, she said simply with quiet confidence. I can do this. What Emma didn't know was that her Mayday call had set off emergency alarms throughout the entire aviation system. The FAA was assembling a crisis team. Boeing's technical emergency unit was mobilizing. Senior airline captains were racing to air traffic control centers. News organizations picked up the story from aviation radio scanners. Within minutes, the entire world would be watching. Television networks interrupted regular programming with breaking news. 13-year-old girl attempting to land passenger jet. Emma's parents, watching television at home, saw their daughter's name flash across the screen. They collapsed, holding each other, unable to breathe, praying harder than they had ever prayed in their lives. In the control tower, dozens of aviation experts gathered around, ready to help. And at her home computer, a senior 737 captain named Sarah Mitchell was patching into the radio frequency, ready to guide Emma through the most important flight of her life. The next hour passed in focused intensity. The autopilot continued flying the plane smoothly while Emma worked through a complete systems check with Controller Martinez. Hydraulic systems? He asked. Emma scanned the displays. All three systems showing normal pressure. Electrical systems? Both generators online. All buses powered. Cabin pressure? Holding steady at 8,000 feet cabin altitude. Outstanding, Emma. You're doing everything perfectly. Now we have Captain Sarah Mitchell here. She's a senior 737 captain with over 20,000 flight hours. She's going to help guide you to landing. A new voice came through Emma's headset. It was a woman's voice, calm and warm and reassuring. Emma, this is Captain Mitchell. I understand you've been studying my favorite airplane. Yes, ma'am. The 737 is amazing. It certainly is. I've been flying this plane for 18 years, and I'm going to teach you everything you need to land it safely. But first, I need you to understand something important. Landing will be the hardest part. We're not going to rush. We're going to take all the time we need. We'll do everything step by step, and I'll be with you on the radio for every single moment. Can you follow my instructions exactly? Yes, ma'am. I can. Good. Now tell me about your simulator training. What have you practiced? Emma thought about her countless hours at home. I've practiced normal takeoffs and landings, engine failures, electrical problems, bad weather landings, crosswind landings. I've flown to maybe 50 different airports. Excellent. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to break every task into small steps. You'll focus on one thing at a time. Nothing happens until I tell you. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Understood. Perfect. Now where are we landing? You're currently over Nevada. Looking at your route, Las Vegas International is about 150 miles ahead. They have long runways, perfect weather, and they're preparing for you right now. That's where we're going. Emma felt a small wave of relief. She had practiced landings at Las Vegas many times. She knew the airport. Behind Emma in the cabin, the passengers were in various states of fear. Some were praying. Others were crying quietly. Parents held their children close. The businessman who had ignored Emma earlier was now listening to every radio transmission on his airline app, realizing that the teenage girl he had dismissed was now his only hope. One mother asked Jennifer, "Is there really no one else?" "That's just a child." Jennifer looked at her with firm kindness. "That child is our best and only option. And I believe in her. We all need to trust her now." In the cockpit, Captain Mitchell's voice brought Emma back to focus. "Emma, in about 30 minutes we're going to begin descending. Before we do, I need you to understand what you'll feel. When you disconnect the autopilot for landing, the plane will feel heavy and powerful. We'll want to move. Your job is to make small, gentle corrections. Don't overcorrect. Think of it like steering a bike on a slippery road. Everything happens slowly. Be gentle. Small corrections. Be gentle. Got it? Good. Now, I want you to lightly rest your hands on the control yoke. Don't move it. Just feel what the autopilot is doing." Emma placed her hands on the yoke. Immediately, she felt subtle movements, tiny adjustments the autopilot was constantly making. It was alive under her hands, powerful and responsive. "I feel it," she said softly. "It's making small corrections all the time." "Perfect. That's exactly right. Now look outside and tell me what you see." Emma looked through the windscreen. The sky was impossibly blue and clear. Far below, she could see the desert landscape. The horizon curved gently. It was beautiful. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Captain Mitchell's voice softened. "It is, isn't it? That view is why we love flying, Emma. You're about to join a very special group of people who truly understand what it means to fly. Are you ready?" Emma thought about her dream of sitting in this seat. She had never wanted it like this, with so much pressure and so many lives at stake. But here she was. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "All right," Captain Mitchell said. "In 5 minutes we begin descent. Tell me the basic landing sequence." Emma closed her eyes and visualized the steps she had practiced so many times. Descend to pattern altitude. Add flaps gradually. Extend landing gear. Establish approach speed. Maintain glide path. Touch down smoothly. Deploy brakes. Perfect. Absolutely perfect, Emma. Let's make it happen. The next 45 minutes became a masterclass in precision. Step by step, Emma followed Captain Mitchell's instructions exactly. Emma, begin descent. Set vertical speed to 2,000 feet per minute. Emma's hands moved to the autopilot controls. The plane's nose pitched down slightly. Behind her, passengers felt the descent. "Beautiful, Emma. How does it feel?" "Stable. Responding perfectly." At 20,000 feet, it was time to start preparing for landing. "Emma, extend flaps to position 1. Emma moved the flap lever. She felt the plane's behavior change as the flaps extended slightly. Flaps 1 extended. Speed decreasing. Perfect. Las Vegas appeared in the distance, the city glittering in the desert. The airport was a geometric pattern of runways, and Emma's heart beat faster. At 15,000 feet, "Emma, extend flaps to position 5. Emma moved the lever again, feeling another change in how the plane flew. "Now landing gear. This is important. When you extend the gear, you'll hear loud rumbling and feel vibration. The nose will want to drop. Be ready to add power." Emma's hand moved to the landing gear lever. She pulled it down. The rumble was immediate and dramatic, much louder than in her simulator. The whole plane shook. The nose dropped. "Add power, Emma." Emma pushed the throttles forward. The engine tone increased. The nose steadied. 3 green lights appeared on the panel. "Gear down, 3 green lights," Emma reported, pride in her voice. "Beautifully done. You're a natural. Let's bring you home." At 5 miles from the runway, with Las Vegas International spread out before her, Captain Mitchell gave the instruction Emma had been dreading. "Emma, it's time. Disconnect the autopilot. Take manual control. The disconnect button is where your thumb rests on the yoke." Emma's thumb found the button. This was it. Once she pressed this button, there would be no computer helping. Just her and the plane and 300 lives. She pressed it. A soft chime sounded. Suddenly, the yoke came alive in her hands with power she had never felt in simulation. Every tiny movement she made moved a 100-ton aircraft. She made a small correction. Felt the wings respond. "You've got it, Emma. You're flying." Let's talk you down. Check your airspeed. 165 knots. Perfect. Extend flaps to full. Emma moved the lever. The plane slowed and stabilized. The runway was ahead now, a long strip of concrete. 1,000 feet altitude. You're on perfect glide path. Maintain 145 knots. Emma's eyes moved constantly, checking instruments, looking outside, checking instruments again. 500 feet. You're doing beautifully. The runway was rushing up now, growing larger every second. Emma could see emergency vehicles lining the sides. She could see people watching. 200 feet. 100 feet. At 50 feet, I'm going to tell you to flare. That means gently pull back to raise the nose. The ground was right there. 50 feet. Emma, begin flare now. Gentle pull back. Emma's hands moved smoothly, pulling the yoke back. The nose rose. The plane transitioned from descending to floating just above the runway. Then the main wheels touched the concrete with a gentle bump. Emma held the nose up for a moment, then let it settle. Without hesitation, she deployed the speed brakes and thrust reversers. The roar of the reversers filled the cockpit. The plane began slowing rapidly. Emma's feet found the rudder pedals, keeping them centered on the runway. Her hands moved to the brakes, applying smooth, steady pressure. They rolled down the runway, speed bleeding away. Finally, 3,000 feet from touchdown, Emma brought Flight 394 to a complete stop. For a moment, absolute silence filled the radio. Then Captain Mitchell's voice came through, thick with emotion. Emma Rodriguez, that was a perfect landing. You just saved 300 lives. Emma sat back in the seat and tears began streaming down her face. Behind her, the cabin erupted in cheers, sobs, and applause that shook the aircraft. People were screaming with joy. Strangers were hugging. Parents were holding their children and crying. She had done it. A 13-year-old girl had just landed a commercial jet. Emergency vehicles surrounded the plane immediately. Paramedics rushed aboard to treat the pilots, who would fully recover after treatment for carbon monoxide poisoning. As Emma stood up from the captain's seat, her whole body shaking, Jennifer threw her arms around the young girl who had saved everyone. You did it. Jennifer sobbed. You amazing, incredible girl. You did it. When Emma walked into the cabin, every single passenger stood up in a standing ovation. Tears streamed down countless faces. People reached out to touch her, to thank her. The businessman who had ignored her earlier grasped her hand with both of his. Young lady, he said, tears in his eyes, you gave me the chance to see my grandchildren again. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. The mother who had been skeptical earlier hugged Emma tight. You saved my babies. You're a hero. Within hours, Emma's story exploded across every news outlet worldwide. Television networks showed footage of the landing. They played audio of her calm communications. Aviation experts were calling her achievement extraordinary, unprecedented, miraculous. Her name was trending on every social media platform. News headlines read, 13-year-old girl lands passenger jet and saves 300 lives. People were calling her a hero, a miracle, an inspiration. But sitting in a quiet room at Las Vegas airport, video calling her parents who were sobbing with relief halfway across the country, Emma didn't feel like a hero. Mom, Dad, I'm okay, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm safe. Her parents couldn't speak for several moments. They just cried and looked at their daughter through the screen, grateful beyond words. Later, Captain Sarah Mitchell came to see Emma in person. She shook Emma's hand firmly, looking directly into her eyes. Emma, I've been flying professionally for 18 years. I've trained hundreds of pilots. What you did today was extraordinary. When you're old enough for flight school, you call me. I will personally make sure you get the finest training available. The FAA conducted a full investigation. They interviewed Emma extensively about her simulator training. They were amazed at her knowledge level. Her simulator logs showed she had indeed logged over 800 hours of practice. Her understanding of aircraft systems was beyond what many licensed pilots possessed. 3 months later, Emma stood before her entire middle school at an assembly, telling her story. She talked about the value of passion and preparation. She talked about pursuing your interests even when others don't understand. She talked about trusting yourself when the situation seems impossible. People call me a hero, she said, looking out at her classmates and teachers. But I want you to understand something. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who loved something so much that I studied it all the time. I practiced when I could have been doing easier things. And when people needed me, I was ready. She paused, gathering her thoughts. What I learned that day at 37,000 feet is this. The things you love, the knowledge you gain, even when others think it's weird or pointless, Those things matter more than you can imagine. You never know when the world will need exactly what you've been preparing for. The auditorium was completely silent. Students who used to tease Emma about her boring flight game now looked at her with respect and awe. So find something you love, Emma continued. Something that excites you so much that you want to learn everything about it. Study it. Practice it. Become an expert at it, not because you have to, but because you love it. Because someday your passion might be exactly what the world needs. 10 years later, First Officer Emma Rodriguez sat in the right seat of a Boeing 737, preparing for takeoff. She was 23 years old now, a fully licensed commercial airline pilot. Sitting beside her was Captain Jennifer Wilson, the same flight attendant who had brought her into the cockpit that fateful day and had since become a pilot herself, inspired by Emma's courage. "Ready for departure, First Officer Rodriguez?" Jennifer asked with a smile. "Ready, Captain Wilson," Emma replied, her hands moving confidently across the controls. As they lifted off into the blue sky, Emma remembered that day 10 years ago. The fear, the pressure, the impossible situation. She remembered the feeling of those controls coming alive in her hands for the first time. The runway rising to meet her. The moment she realized she could actually do it. Emma had gone on to complete flight school with honors. She had earned her commercial pilot's license. She had logged thousands of hours of real flight time. But she would always remember her first real flight, the one where she sat alone at 13 years old, responsible for 300 strangers, guided only by her love of aviation and her determination to never give up. The story of the 13-year-old girl who landed a passenger jet became legendary in aviation. It was taught in flight schools as an example of how knowledge and preparation matter. It was shared in motivational speeches about the power of passion. It was remembered as proof that heroes aren't always the ones with the most experience or credentials. Sometimes heroes are simply the ones who are ready when they're needed. The ones who prepared through love and dedication. The ones who were capable of the impossible because they never stopped believing in themselves. Every time Captain Emma Rodriguez, as she would eventually become, sat in a cockpit, whether training students or flying passengers or teaching the next generation of pilots, she shared her story. And she always ended with the same message. Love something so deeply that you study it even when no one else understands why. Practice so much that it becomes part of who you are. Because someday when everything is on the line and the impossible happens, your passion might be the only thing standing between disaster and miracle. The skills you develop simply because you love them might save lives. The knowledge you gain out of pure interest might change the world. Never let anyone tell you your passion is worthless or your dreams are silly. Because you never know when your moment will come, when you'll be called to do something impossible and your years of preparation will be the only thing that matters. Emma Rodriguez proved that age doesn't determine ability. That simulators aren't just games, they're training tools. That a 13-year-old with enough passion and preparation can achieve the impossible. She proved that heroes come in all ages and sizes. That courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite fear. That knowledge earned through love is never wasted. And most importantly, she proved that when you pursue your passion with dedication and study it with devotion, you'll be ready when your moment comes. Because somewhere, somehow, someday the world will need exactly what you've been preparing for your entire life. If Emma's story inspired you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below with your dreams and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.